Lila Park stood in front of the glass display case at Miller's Bakery on the corner of 5th and Main, her breath fogging the surface as she stared at the last chocolate cupcake sitting alone on the top shelf. It was her 32nd birthday, and she had promised herself something small, something sweet, just to mark the day. But when the cashier rang it up and said $3.47, Lila's stomach dropped. She had $3.19 in her coat pocket. She'd counted it twice that morning. "I'm sorry," she said quietly, stepping back from the counter. "I thought I had enough." The cashier, a teenager with tired eyes, just shrugged and moved to put the cupcake back. Lila turned toward the door, her cheeks burning with embarrassment she couldn't quite explain. It wasn't just about the cupcake. It was about standing alone in a bakery on her birthday, unable to afford the smallest kindness to herself. It was about the violin case gathering dust in her closet, the one she hadn't opened in 3 years, not since the car accident that crushed 2 vertebrae and left her hands weak and unreliable. It was about the silence in her apartment and the way her phone never rang anymore, not since she'd stopped returning calls from friends who didn't know how to talk to her after everything fell apart. She pushed through the door into the freezing February air, pulling her thin coat tighter. Snow had been falling since dawn, blanketing the city in a kind of hushed stillness that made everything feel even lonelier. "Excuse me," a voice called behind her. Lila turned to see a man in a firefighter's jacket holding the cupcake in one hand and a small boy's hand in the other. The boy, maybe 9 years old, had dark eyes full of curiosity and a blue winter hat pulled down over his ears. "You forgot this," the man said, holding out the cupcake. "I didn't buy it," Lila said, confused. "We did," the boy piped up. "Dad said it's your birthday. Is it really your birthday?" Lila blinked, caught off guard by the directness of the question. "How did you?" "You told the lady at the counter," the man explained, a little sheepish. "We were in line behind you. I'm Jonathan. This is my son, Milo." "Happy birthday," Milo said, grinning. "Are you going to eat it alone? Because that's kind of sad." "Milo," Jonathan said, but there was no real reprimand in his voice, just the weary affection of a single parent who'd learned to pick his battles. Lila looked down at the cupcake, then at the boy's earnest face, and something in her chest cracked open just a little. "Yeah," she admitted. "You could come with us," Milo said. "We're going to the diner. Dad always gets pancakes on Saturdays, and I get French toast, and you could get whatever you want." Jonathan met her eyes, and she saw it there, the same kind of loneliness she carried, the kind that came from loss and kept you at arm's length from the world. "You don't have to," he said, "but if you want company, we'd be glad to have you." Lila hadn't planned on saying yes. She hadn't planned on anything except going home and pretending the day didn't matter. But something about the way Milo looked at her, like she was someone worth knowing, made her nod. "Okay," she said. "Thank you." They walked 3 blocks to Rosie's Diner, Milo chattering the whole way about his favorite kinds of syrup and how his teacher said snow was just frozen rain, which he thought sounded boring. Jonathan walked beside her quietly, occasionally glancing over like he was checking to make sure she hadn't disappeared. Inside, the diner was warm and smelled like coffee and butter, and they slid into a red vinyl booth by the window. Lila ordered hot chocolate and eggs. And when the food came, Milo insisted she try a bite of his French toast because Rosie made it better than anyone in the world. She laughed for the first time in weeks, and it felt strange and good all at once. "So, what do you do?" Jonathan asked, his tone casual but kind. Lila hesitated. "I used to play violin," she said. "Professionally. But I don't anymore." "Why not?" She flexed her fingers under the table, feeling the dull ache that never quite went away. "I got hurt. My hands don't work the way they used to." Milo's eyes widened. "That's so sad. Do you miss it?" "Every day," Lila said, and she was surprised by how honest it felt to say out loud. Jonathan didn't offer empty comfort or tell her things would get better. He just nodded, like he understood what it meant to lose something you couldn't get back. Later, when they were finishing their coffee, he told her about his wife, Elena, who had died in a house fire 2 years ago while trying to save a neighbor's cat. He told her how Milo still had nightmares and how he didn't know if he was doing enough to help him heal. "He seems like a good kid," Lila said softly. "He is," Jonathan said, "but he's scared a lot, and I don't always know how to reach him." Milo, who had been drawing on his napkin, looked up. "I'm not scared right now," he said. Jonathan smiled, a little sad. "I'm glad." When they walked Lila back to her building an hour later, Milo hugged her goodbye without warning, his small arms tight around her waist. "Thanks for coming," he said. "You made it more fun." Lila's throat tightened. "You made my birthday better than I thought it would be," she said. Jonathan handed her a scrap of paper with his phone number. "If you ever want to grab coffee," he said, "or if you ever feel like teaching music again, even just a little, Milo could use someone like you." Lila tucked the number into her pocket, not sure she'd ever use it. But 3 days later, when her apartment felt too quiet and the walls seemed to close in, she texted him. They met for coffee, and then they met again, and soon she was stopping by twice a week to teach Milo simple melodies on an old keyboard Jonathan had found at a thrift store. At first, her hands trembled too much to demonstrate, so she would hum the notes and guide Milo's fingers instead. But slowly, something unexpected happened. The more she taught, the steadier her hands became. Not perfect, not the way they used to be, but enough to play a scale, enough to hold a chord, enough to feel music moving through her again like a language she thought she'd forgotten. Milo blossomed under her attention. His nightmares grew less frequent, and he started talking more about what he remembered of his mother, the good things, the way she used to sing off-key in the kitchen, and how she always let him lick the spoon when she made brown cake batter. Lila listened, and she told him about her own mother, who had died when she was young, and how music had been the thing that kept her company when nothing else could. Jonathan watched them with something like wonder, and somewhere in the quiet moments between lessons, he and Lila fell in love. It wasn't sudden or dramatic. It was gentle and inevitable, like two people who've been wandering the cold finally finding warmth in each other. He kissed her for the first time on a rainy afternoon in April, right there in his kitchen, while Milo practiced scales in the living room, and it felt like coming home. By summer, Lila had moved in, and the three of them had become a family in all the ways that mattered. They cooked dinners together and took walks in the park. And on weekends, Lila would play violin while Milo accompanied her on keyboard, their music drifting through the open windows. Then one afternoon in August, Milo came running into the kitchen, holding a yellowed newspaper clipping he'd found in a box in the garage. "Lila, is this you?" he asked, breathless. She took the paper from him, and her heart stopped. It was an article from 5 years ago, about a building collapsed downtown. The headline read, "Anonymous woman pulls firefighter from rubble." There was a grainy photo of her, younger and uninjured, helping a man in a firefighter's uniform out of the wreckage. Jonathan walked in, took one look at the clipping, and went pale. "That was you," he said quietly. Lila nodded, her hands shaking. "I didn't know it was you. I just saw someone trapped, and I pulled them out. I left before anyone could get my name." Jonathan sat down slowly, staring at her like he was seeing her for the first time. "I looked for you," he said, "for months. I wanted to thank you, but no one knew who you were." Milo looked between them, his eyes wide. "So Lila saved you? Before we even met her?" Jonathan nodded, and then he started to cry, something Lila had never seen him do. She wrapped her arms around him, and Milo climbed into the chair with them, and they sat there together, holding on to each other like they were the only solid thing in the world. "I think we were supposed to find each other," Jonathan said after a while. "Twice." They got married that fall in a small ceremony at the park where they'd taken so many walks. Milo was the ring bearer, and he cried happy tears when Jonathan kissed Lila at the altar a year later. They started a foundation called Second Chances, offering free music therapy to children who had experienced trauma. Lila taught violin and piano, her hands steady now, her heart full in ways she'd never imagined possible. She still thought about that morning in the bakery sometimes, about the cupcake she couldn't afford and the loneliness that had felt so permanent. But now, when she looked at Jonathan and Milo, when she heard music filling the rooms of their home, she understood that healing didn't always look the way you expected. Sometimes it came in the form of a curious boy and his kind father. Sometimes it came when you stopped running from your grief and let someone else carry it with you. And sometimes it starts with something as small and forgettable as a $3 cupcake, and the courage to say yes to strangers who saw you when you thought you were invisible.